Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I want to touch upon the reports that have been circulating recently in regards to MPs and foreign interference. Now we've been waiting for more and more information to come out and potentially even the names of the MPs to be released. Earlier today, some news came out on CTV with Vassie Capelli, and this is what she had to say.
Mr. McGinty referenced the RCMP, and we do have some breaking news for you. After multiple requests from CTV and I imagine other news outlets to the RCMP about whether or not they are investigating the idea that there could be parliamentarians acting as witting foreign agents, essentially, we have received a statement. It's quite lengthy. I just got it into my inbox, and so I'm just going to share the parts I find the most salient with you right now. You can catch the whole thing on our website, I'm sure, a little bit later this evening. The RCMP can confirm there are investigations into a broad range of foreign interference in Canada, the statement says, including matters which intersect with democratic institutions. The RCMP will not provide comment whether there is an active criminal investigation into any parliamentarians. The statement goes on to say, an RCMP confirmation of such an investigation has the potential to cause damage to reputations prior to meeting an appropriate level of proof or to interfere with an ongoing investigation. Finally, the statement says, with respect to the information contained in the NSICOP report and what the RCMP knew and did not know at the time, the RCMP is part of the national security community and works closely with partners to combat all types of national security threats. Although the RCMP did not receive information regarding all the matters contained in the report, the RCMP was aware of the broad range of work being done by partners. So no confirmation from the RCMP. They say they will not comment on whether they're investigating the specifics of what has been alleged in the NSICOP report. And of course, the government is saying the arena for doing so is with the RCMP.
Now, right off the bat, and this is just my opinion, I think it's a little insane that they're not going to release any names. I understand they probably want to get some more concrete evidence if they don't have that by now, but I don't think that they would be putting any certain individuals' names in there unless they had something on those. And if they do, then they should release the names to the Canadian public, because as elections are going to be coming up and all that, the more information we know on the constituents and the people that we're going to be voting for and electing, I think is quite important. Now, as you heard at the end of Vassie's statement there, the government has claimed that it's up to the RCMP to go forward with all this. And this is something that Freeland also expressed when she was pushed on it earlier this week at an announcement.
Because the findings of the committee are concerning, and they should be. As the Minister of Public Safety has said, we have confidence in our law enforcement bodies to do their job. And I am glad that our government has now put forward the strongest measures of any Canadian government when it comes to foreign interference, giving our law enforcement bodies the tools to act.
Deputy Prime Minister, you said that the findings are concerning. And you have confidence in all law enforcement to do the work that they have to do. I guess I would ask, doesn't the public, though, have a right to know who these parliamentarians might be, especially as we approach an election sometime soon, possibly this year, possibly more than likely next year?
Let me just say this. We take foreign interference really, really seriously, and I'm just going to speak personally for a minute. Having worked in authoritarian regimes myself, I take the fight in the world right now between democracy and dictatorship really, really seriously, and I think it's moving to a new level.
I'm going to ask a question from the moderator's chair. It's known that democracy thrives in sunlight, and you've talked about the attacks on democracy. And it's already been talked about that Canadians have lost confidence in our electoral system and our institutions, in part because of this foreign interference debate. Are you not concerned that by not releasing the names of the MPs who are involved and accused of what this committee is accusing them of, that you are further undermining confidence in the system? And why are we affording them that protection?
So let me just start by saying I don't think Canadians have lost confidence in our democracy.
It's just astonishing that Freeland has made it this far through life when 9 out of 10 times, at least to me, she seems like an ostrich whose head is in the ground and is oblivious to everything, it seems. Because for her to come out here and say that Canadians still have faith in the so-called democracy that we've been exposed to is absolutely nuts. And it's quite clear that she doesn't even believe that, because the following day, she ran away from reporters before they could even ask her about this whole situation.
De réduire le taux d'intérêt, c'est une très très bonne nouvelle pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes, pour le Canada. Notre plan fonctionne. Merci beaucoup.
Ms. Freeland, can you please answer on the foreign interference on the review? Why is there no review? Ms. Freeland, sorry. Your government's launching here will be reviewed. Please verify your comments. Yes, Ms. Freeland. Will there be a review?
Like, she's such an absolute coward, and I love that the reporters actually chased her. Unfortunately, I don't think they got much from her because she probably just kept ignoring them. But I want to go back to the power play with Vassie, as she's going to be addressing 3 members of Parliament, NDP, Conservative, and Liberal. And I want to play a little bit of each one of their answers before we get into the committee hearing with Dominic LeBlanc. And this guy is just another bozo.
Mr. Noor Mohammed, I'll start with you. Does your government not think it's a big deal that this report alleges that there is intelligence to show that parliamentarians wittingly, quote, assisted foreign state actors soon after their election?
Well, our government takes this very seriously. We were the government that actually set up NCCOP and NCIRA, the bodies that have been doing this work. In particular, the NCCOP report was done as a result of a body that was set up by our government. So obviously, we take this seriously. What's also serious is making sure that we respect our law enforcement and our national security apparatus that are now doing the work that you've just pointed out the RCMP has mentioned. This should not be something that is politicized, should not be a political football. Every political party should be working together to ensure that we're protecting Canadian democracy and that we're ensuring that Canadians feel secure in knowing that their democracy is being protected by all parliamentarians.
I think the point of this report is to say that they don't feel so secure. Particularly, I imagine now that they've learned there could be sitting members of parliament or sitting senators who are acting on behalf of hostile actors to further their own interests against the national interest. I don't think, it requires a conviction to kick someone out of caucus. Are you aware of anyone in your caucus who is among this group of people?
I think the report speaks for itself, right? The report says there are concerns. Those concerns have been turned over to law enforcement.
The report actually doesn't specify that it's being turned over to law enforcement, just in some instances.
So in some instances. But this is the work of our national security apparatus, is the work of our intelligence agencies. They're the ones that get to decide, not us. This should not be a political game. It is not that. And I think it is essential that all parliamentarians and all parties be in the room for those conversations. We're hearing Conservatives say, name names. You said that at the beginning of your report. I think what is important is that the leader of the Conservative Party should get his clearance. He should be in the room to be able to be appropriately briefed, because this is a matter of national security that requires all Canadians to know that every party takes this seriously.
I understand that, and I have questions for Mr. Chong. But in what that your government has said over the past 48 hours would imbue a sense on Canadians that you are taking this seriously. Minister LeBlanc disagrees fundamentally with the overall conclusion of the report, that your government has been incredibly slow to react to the issue of foreign interference, and that has aided and abetted in the problem that exists today. He's been on this program and said, I don't come to the same conclusion. On this issue, all we keep hearing is that it's for the RCMP to investigate. We don't know if your government has actively sent this information to the RCMP, whether you're investigating it yourselves, the possibility of members of your caucus being involved. We don't know any of that. Why would we think you're taking it seriously?
Fundamentally, our approach is, and I believe I would argue the approach of any government should be, to trust our law enforcement, to trust our national security apparatus to do the work that they are doing. The second the political actors start to determine what our national security apparatus is or should be doing, there's a fundamental breakdown in that trust. So our obligation as a government is to not only be responsible to empower law enforcement and the national security apparatus to do their work, but to ensure that that work remains independent. And that is what Canadians expect of government.
But the report also says that the people around the Prime Minister didn't even feel it was necessary to share this kind of stuff with him. Why did they not feel that it was necessary to do that? And again, does this stuff happen because your government isn't taking it seriously?
Now, this is some fantastic line of questioning from Vassie, But I do think she's forgotten that Trudeau's openly admitted he doesn't like reading his reports, and his preferred method of getting information is done orally. But as we move back to what Noor Mohammed was saying, he starts off by bragging about how the Liberals were the ones who created NSICOP and NCIRA, the government agencies, but the mandate of those agencies is to review Canada's national security and intelligence and then report on that. Yet they haven't even been able to do that because another report from the National Post, I believe it was, said that over 1,000 plus documents are being currently blocked from them. So that's already strike one. Number two, yeah, I agree it shouldn't be a political thing, which is why you should let the names out. Because if it's a Conservative member, NDP member, or Liberal member, I think you guys in your own party would want to know, but also the Canadian public would want to know because these are the people that they're voting on. These are the people that they're electing into these ridings, into these positions. So they would want to know who might be dabbling with foreign interference. Now, Noor Mohammed does bring up a valid point, saying that Pierre could get his security clearance to read these documents and find out. Now, Vasi does pose that question to Michael Chong, the Conservative member, and he pushes back by saying, yeah, Pierre could do that, but once he finds out who those names are or reads those documents, he's essentially put under a gag order and wouldn't be able to disclose anything. How true that actually is, I'm not sure, but let's listen to him talk about that.
Mr. Chong, is your party aware of this intelligence? Have you seen any of it? And will you name names if members of your caucus are among those?
We absolutely will name names of anybody, any staffer, any campaign worker, any member of parliament that knowingly or wittingly participates to further the interests of a foreign state to the detriment of Canada. We absolutely will name that person. But we don't know, because the government has this information and refuses to release it. But let's be clear, this report is damning, and it follows on the heels of the NCIRA report. It follows on the heels of the initial report of Justice Hogue at the public inquiry, and all of these reports are coming to the same conclusion, which is the government is not taking foreign interference threats seriously. This particular report, the NSICOP report, stated clearly that the Prime Minister was advised as far back as 2018 about serious national security threats to Parliament. He was also advised at that time that the measures in place were not sufficient to counter these threats, and he was advised to take further action. The report outlines how the clerk of the Privy Council in December 2019 went to the Prime Minister to seek approval for an action plan to protect Parliament. It then reiterates a second time where the National Security and Intelligence Advisor went again a year later in December 2020, and then a third time the initiative was taken up in February 2022. In all three cases, the Prime Minister withheld his approval. And so it's clearly an indication of a government that is not acting on taking this threat very seriously.
And I'm not absolving them of their, of the questions that should be directed to them in that vein. And I think I did direct them to Mr. Noor Mohammed. But when you said the government is hiding this information, today in question period, I heard the Minister of Public Safety very specifically say he would share it with the leader of your party. But the leader of your party is refusing the top secret clearance in order to access those documents. How would that make sense to any Canadian watching?
There is no, first off, criminal prosecution is not the only tool that we need to use to combat foreign interference. CSIS and other security agencies have long advised that sunlight and transparency is a critical tool to combating these foreign interference threat activities. And one way to do that is to publicly reveal the names of parliamentarians that are willingly cooperating with foreign states to harm Canada and its people.
But what if they don't have proof? Like, I understand your point. That's why I asked Mr. Noor Mohammed. But you could ruin somebody's life. You're essentially accusing them of treason. If you don't have hard evidence of that you have intelligence coming from a credible source, but it has yet to turn into the evidence that's necessary to rise to the level of the RCMP being able to prosecute, essentially, like, is that irresponsible in some way?
If they don't have evidence, if they don't have intelligence, if they don't have information, then of course it would be irresponsible. But when you read this report, it's clear that the government has loads of information about a few parliamentarians that are engaged in this this subversive activity. And those individuals need to be named so that Parliament can take action to hold them accountable.
And just to circle back where I started, I hear you on the need for transparency, but I still don't understand why the leader of your party would not want to access these documents, particularly when the report talks about efforts of India to interfere in your own party's leadership race.
So two answers to that question, very simple. Number one, if he goes through that process, he himself is not allowed to reveal the names of the individuals involved. He then would be bound by the Secrecy of Information Act and other federal acts that would preclude him from talking about it, which is why the members of NCCOP are bound by that and unable to reveal the names, even though they know who the individuals are. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is, you're right, the report highlights that the PRC interfered in both the 2020 and 2022 Conservative leadership races. It also highlights that India interfered in the 2022 leadership race. But we don't know if they interfered to the benefit of certain Conservative leadership campaign contenders or to the harm of those leadership contenders. We don't know anything about it, which is why
isn't it responsible for your leader to find out?
We want to know on the floor of the House of Commons, with sunlight and transparency. That is the disinfectant, a powerful tool that CSIS has said many times that will combat a lot of foreign interference threats we're facing.
Now, if what Michael Chong is saying here is true, then this is essentially the biggest double-edged sword. Because if Pierre does get his clearance, finds out, he's then, I guess, sworn to secrecy and can't actually tell us who these names are. But if he doesn't get his clearance and then he just keeps pushing on the House of Commons, that will most likely never come out because those individuals are sworn to secrecy. So you're essentially damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. There's kind of a stalemate until more information does come out. But now I want to play just a small snippet of Julian and Vassie going back and forth because she pushes him quite well on a lot of the topics. And it's just so sad to see this guy talk about how disappointed he is with the Liberals, yet their party is keeping the Liberals propped up.
Mr. Singh was the first person yesterday, really, to come out and ask the government about this and call into question why they're not doing more. I have to ask, on a matter as serious as this, that the government is unwilling to really come forward with transparency around the issue of parliamentarians acting as foreign agents. Does that not cast doubt on your party's willingness to keep them in that position of power, Mr. Julian?
Well, first off, Jagmeet Singh was the first to raise this issue of foreign interference. He raised it over 15 months ago, as you recall. It was the NDP that pushed first to have a motion of non-confidence in the special rapporteur that Mr. Trudeau appointed, and to get to the public inquiry into foreign interference. That was all the NDP's work. Jagmeet Singh is, if you look at paragraph 30...
Let's give credit to the Globe and Mail who put this
I'm saying
on all of
in
this,
terms of
sure.
the mechanisms and in terms of the tools that were used, it was the NDP in the House.
Should there also not be concern about the fact that this raises the specter of actual parliamentarians, past and present, sitting among you who could be acting as foreign agents? Are you sure there are none in your caucus? And if you find out there are, will you name names?
We would, but yes, we absolutely have been the target of foreign interference. We've not been the recipient in any way.
And are you okay with the fact that the Prime Minister does not feel it necessary to reveal any of this information?
I'm not comfortable with the fact that the Prime Minister has not put into place the resources necessary for the RCMP to do that complete investigation and for the Elections Commissioner.
That's not an answer to my question. Are you okay with the Prime Minister not revealing anything in addition?
We believe that names should be released when it's appropriate. We believe that the charges should be brought, and we believe if convicted, members of Parliament who have been convicted of those crimes, whether treason or whether it's violations of the Canada Elections Act, should not be sitting in Parliament.
No, I absolutely love it when Vassie fact checks them in real time, where she just blatantly says, well, let's give credit where credit is due. It's actually the Globe and Mail, not the NDP. But before this video gets too long, I do want to play some of the committee hearing with the Public Safety and National Security meeting that happened earlier today. And this is the opening with the Conservative member Caputo questioning Dominic LeBlanc, the Liberal, and just listen to this guy's answers.
Through you, Chair, I direct the following questions to Minister LeBlanc. The NCCOP report that was recently released reveals that parliamentarians, including members of our House and the House of Commons, knowingly and deliberately assisted a hostile foreign state to the detriment of the people of Canada. This places a cloud of suspicion over every single member of the House, elected members. Do you know the names of these people?
Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Caputo, thank you for the question. I am updated regularly, and I think in a complete way, by our intelligence agencies, by the RCMP, by the Department of Public Safety. So I am very comfortable that I have the information that I need to do the work that I have to do, but you'll understand that discussing the details, particularly of the most sensitive information, is not something that we want to do publicly.
Well, I'm not asking you to discuss sensitive information. I'm asking whether you know the names. Do you know the names, yes or no?
I know a number of names that were surfaced in various intelligence products that I have seen, but I was not in the room when the Committee of Parliamentarians did their work. I don't have the exact details of which documents they saw and didn't see. But I'm very comfortable that I have access to all of the most important intelligence information, which would include, in some cases, names.
Okay. So people who are alleged, and in some cases, according to our intelligence communities, to have committed some of the most serious offenses known to Canadian law, are you prepared to release those names, yes or no?
No, Mr. Chair.
You will not release the names of members, elected members, operating in the House of Commons. Do you think Canadians have a right to know, yes or no?
Mr. Chair, I think it's important for Canadians to understand that these names are contained in intelligence reports. In some cases, it's uncorroborated or unverified intelligence information. I think we would need to be very careful to understand that, as the director himself has said, intelligence is often a series of pieces of a puzzle. One particular piece of the puzzle, an intelligence source or information, may not have a context, may be discredited or altered by subsequent information. So the idea that there's a perfect list of names that is
Minister,
entirely reliable that
Minister,
should be released to the public is simply irresponsible.
Minister, the NSICOP report doesn't equivocate like you just did. The NSICOP report is clear, incredibly clear on names. Do you think Canadians should have the right to know?
Not actually clear on names.
I'm not done my
Mr.
question, Minister. Do you think Canadians have the right to know when they go to cast an X next to the name of somebody in the next 15 months, the very thing that we're dealing with here in Bill C-70, do you think they have the right to know whether their member is under the influence of a hostile foreign state? Yes or no?
Mr. Chair, I think Canadians know, and I'm confident that they have every reason to be reassured that our intelligence agencies and the RCMP take their responsibilities extraordinarily seriously, have the resources necessary to investigate, and should the RCMP, for example, in their wisdom decide that charges should be laid in consultation with the appropriate prosecutors, that's our system in a rule of law democracy. It's not simply releasing a series of names or doing, as Mr. Caputo says he's concerned about, casting aspersions himself on everybody by pretending that there's some perfect list of names that the government's not releasing. No other Western democracy knows this, and Mr. Caputo knows that certainly in the government of Mr. Harper, even that kind of conversation wouldn't have been conceivable. So I think there's a certain disingenuous element, Mr. Chair, in Mr. Caputo's theatrics this morning.
Disingenuous element. Under Mr. Harper's government, we did not get a report that said foreign state actors had infiltrated. Under Mr. Harper's government, we did not have reports saying that foreign state actors had dealt with this. Now, under current legislation, you can disclose top secret information when in the public interest. What would be more in the public interest than a person who could be elected and they are under the thumb of a hostile state actor? You can do that. So when you talk about disingenuous, you can do this. Why won't you before the next election?
Mr. Chair, speaking of disingenuous, in Mr. Harper's government, the National Security Committee of Parliamentarians didn't exist because Mr. Harper's government didn't believe that parliamentarians should have access to this information or be able to review the work of our intelligence agencies. Mr. Harper's government in 2013, CSIS publicly identified an increasing risk of foreign interference in our democratic institutions, and the Harper government did absolutely nothing. So again, Mr. Chair, I think it's important to have a context to these comments.
So you are okay with us going into an election, people putting an X beside a name where they have a cloud of suspicion, every single one of us. Let's face it, Minister. I think if there were six Conservatives on that list and no other Liberals, we would have had the names. Let's be honest here.
Thank you. Now, some might say that Caputo has a point there. If there was Conservative names on that list, I would imagine that the Liberals would want to use that potentially as ammo, seeing as they're doing abysmal in the polls. But it's just so sad that all they do is talk about Harper. Like, it's been almost 10 years since then. And of course, you guys are going to be doing something that the previous government didn't do. Just like the future government most likely will do something that your government didn't do. It is an absolutely stupid point to bring up or defense to use. But as always, this is just my opinion. I'd love to hear from you guys, so please let me know in the comment section below what you think about all this. I do appreciate it if you made it this far. I know it's a bit more of a longer video, but there was a lot to cover. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.